I didn't even drop the bags. Just stood there, the handle of the plastic digging into my palm like it was the only thing still tethering me to reality. My own living room. My own damn house. And there they were, my wife, my daughters, and Jeremy, the cousin I hadn't seen since my mother's funeral. All lined up like they were waiting to cast judgment. Like I was the guest. The way they looked at me, I'll never forget it. Not anger. Not shame. Not even discomfort. Just anticipation. Like I was supposed to applaud this little performance they'd rehearsed. Grace, 17, and suddenly the family spokesperson spoke first. Dad, this is Jeremy. We want to talk. Jeremy. In my armchair. Wearing my old Marine Corps sweatshirt I hadn't worn since back surgery. His leg crossed over like he'd earned that position. We just think it's time we had someone who understands Mom better, Olivia added, like she was reading a script she'd been dying to perform. Her voice didn't even tremble. Lynette? She wouldn't meet my eyes. She stared down at her hands, clasped like a kid caught stealing candy. Not sorry. Just waiting to see how bad it would get. Jeremy gave me a smirk. The kind you give a man you think won't fight back. Like he already owned the place. And Grace, bless her little traitorous heart, twisted the knife. He's our new dad now. No tears. No drama. Just an announcement. Like I was being let go from a job I didn't realize was up for grabs. It was the stillness that got me. The audacity of their calm. How they assumed I'd rage, scream, collapse, do something to let them play victim. But I didn't give them the show. Instead, I did something worse. Something they never saw coming. I remembered everything. The angle Olivia tilted her head when she said, someone who understands Mom better. The way Grace leaned into Jeremy like they'd already accepted him. The smell of Jeremy's cologne, a scent I recognized but couldn't place yet. The empty wine glass next to Lynette's knee. And most of all, the fact that they'd waited until I walked in. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. And I wasn't just being replaced. I was being erased. I didn't even breathe through my mouth. One shallow inhale through the nose, like I was standing next to a venomous snake and didn't want to give it a reason to strike. I turned without a word, because words are for people you still owe an explanation. And these weren't those people anymore. My steps were slow, deliberate. I walked past the shoe rack I built by hand, past the framed photo of Grace's 5th grade science fair, where I stayed up 2 nights straight helping her make a solar system out of ping-pong balls and spray paint. She'd won 3rd place. They made me take that photo. Smiles all around. No? It may as well have been stock footage from another man's life. I grabbed my keys. Felt their familiar weight. My truck fob, the bottle opener Grace gave me for Father's Day when she was 8, and the tiny St. Floria medallion tucked between them. Firefighters keep those like religion. Mine hadn't left my keyring in 30 years. It sure as hell wasn't leaving today. I opened the door. Not fast. Not loud. Just enough for them to hear the final click of the latch as I closed it behind me. They thought that would be the end of it. That I'd stomp off to a motel or a buddy's place to lick my wounds. Maybe cry into a bottle and come crawling back with some therapist-approved apology about how I hadn't been emotionally present. But I wasn't just leaving. I was activating. They didn't know about the burner phone I kept in the bottom of my tackle box. They didn't know I'd started transferring assets 3 months ago when I caught a whiff of Jeremy's name on Lynette's Bluetooth in the car. They didn't know I'd created an encrypted backup of all our family accounts, passwords, even Olivia's college billing info. See, when you've run into burning buildings for a living, you get a 6th sense for when something's already gone to hell. You just haven't smelled the smoke yet. And I'd been smelling smoke for a while. Like when Lynette accidentally tossed the box with my service medals into the garage donation pile twice. Or how the girls suddenly had opinions about me needing to adapt more after retirement. As if being home was a problem. They weren't slipping. They were shifting. The tone, the comments, the timing, they were prepping for something. And Jeremy? Jeremy was the perfect parasite. Not the type to seduce, no. The type to inherit. What they didn't know is I'd already built the firewall. Now I just had to light the match. The bank lobby was cold in that over-conditioned way that feels more surgical than professional. I hadn't been here in over a year, not since I came to add that final envelope. The clerk looked like she was barely out of college. She smiled like I was her grandpa bringing in loose change. If only. I need access to box 117, I said. My voice came out flatter than I meant. But that's what happens when your marriage combusts in your own living room. She checked my ID. Took longer than it needed to. I kept my eyes on the little digital clock on the wall. 2:47 p.m. The moment I officially stopped playing the idiot. The hallway to the vault felt like something out of a movie. Steel doors, muffled hum of motion detectors, and that faint smell of old metal and ink. She let me in and left me alone. The key slid in smoother than I expected. Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it. No dust, no disturbance, just layers of quiet insurance policies against betrayal. Birth certificates, mine, the girls', even Lynette's. Original copies. Trust documents I'd started drafting back when Olivia turned 18. At the time, they were meant to secure their future. Now, they'd become a chessboard, and I was flipping it. Deeds, vehicle titles, retirement allocations. Things Lynette used to shrug off like, "You're the paperwork guy. I'm the life guy." Cute, right? And then, finally, the manila folder with the little red sticker in the corner. The one I'd labeled with nothing but a single date, March 3rd. I sat down and opened it. First page, email printouts. Lynette. He's old, slow, and doesn't get me. But he still pays for everything. Jeremy. Babe, that's why this will be perfect. Let it play out. Then we do our thing. She sent it during our anniversary weekend. I remember now. She'd claimed food poisoning and spent most of the trip in bed. God, I bought her ginger tea. There were 17 pages. Some short, some stupid, some full-on vile. But they all had one thing in common, contempt. Not just for me, but for the life I gave them. The roof, the Sundays, the stability. It wasn't love they were after. It was positioning. Jeremy didn't love her. She didn't even like him. They both just liked what came next. I photographed every page with the burner phone. No cloud, no backups, just cold files on a device no one knew existed, wrapped in duct tape under the seat of my truck. Before I left, I slipped one more thing into the box. A photo, family portrait, the one Lynette had printed on canvas and hung above the fireplace. I folded it neatly, face down, and placed it beneath the documents like a gravestone. And then I locked the box. Not out of nostalgia. Out of habit. Even dead things deserve a coffin. Back at the house, the sun was beginning to sink behind the oaks in the backyard, the same ones I used to string lights through every fall. That yard had seen birthdays, backyard campouts, Lynette's yoga phases, and the one time Grace buried a shoebox full of dead bugs for her nature funeral. Funny how places don't change. Just the people standing in them. Jeremy was at the grill, wearing my apron. The navy one with the faded "Kiss the Cook" print Grace had ironed on when she was 7. He even used my tongs, the ones with the melted edge from that time I dropped them on the 4th of July. From the neighbor's fence, it probably looked normal. Family dinner. Laughs, meat sizzling, daughters gossiping about campus life and influencers I never cared to understand. But inside the house? The temperature dropped with every minute I didn't return. Lynette set the table like muscle memory. 5 plates. 5 napkins, 5 sets of polished silverware. Her hands moved quick, robotic, like she wasn't letting herself think too hard about it. Until her eyes landed on that 5th chair. Mine. She paused, recounted, then removed a setting, then another. By the time the food was ready, they ate with 3 chairs filled and 2 empty. Mine and hers. Because even she couldn't sit down without knowing who she was supposed to be now. Jeremy tried to fill the air with jokes. Man, this grill heats unevenly, huh? Like I hadn't told him that 6 years ago when he visited during that one Christmas where he drank too much and cried about being alone. I'd felt sorry for him then. Not anymore. Grace laughed too hard. Olivia forced a smile. Lynette, meanwhile, kept checking her phone like a slot machine. Swipe. Glance. Lock screen. Repeat. Nothing. I'd made sure of that. Her first call went a voicemail immediately. No ring, no delay, just the sterile voice of my burner's setup message. She stared at the phone like it had malfunctioned. Then tried again. Then again. Same result. 3 chairs. 3 strained conversations. 3 people slowly realizing that the silence wasn't passive. It wasn't absence. It was deliberate. And that's when it started to unravel, not loudly. Not yet. But with those subtle fractures you only notice after a storm has already passed. The empty chair wasn't just empty. It was looming. The drive to Emily's place was long enough for my thoughts to turn dangerous. Not violent, strategic. You don't spend your life running into fire without learning how to evaluate risk, how to time collapse. And right now, I was watching the emotional load-bearing walls of my family buckle in slow motion. Emily lived on a quiet cul-de-sac upstate, the kind of neighborhood with manicured lawns and wind chimes that never seemed to stop. It still smelled like my brother there. Or maybe that was just the ghost of what life was supposed to look like. She opened the door and hugged me like I'd already said everything. No questions. No how are yous. Just held on for a second longer than necessary. That's the thing about widows. Grief makes them fluent in silent conversations. We sat on her back porch, tea in hand, sun low in the sky, cicadas buzzing like background tension. I didn't even know how to start, so I just said, "It's Jeremy." Her face didn't twitch. She nodded, like she'd been waiting for me to show up with that sentence. "I figured," she said. "You wouldn't come otherwise." And then she started talking. Told me how Jeremy had dated her, briefly, after my brother died. Said he showed up out of nowhere one night with flowers and a story about how we can lean on each other. At the time, she thought grief was messy. She excused it, until he tried moving in, 3 weeks in. Said she shouldn't be alone in a house full of memories. Told her he'd help handle the bills. Problem was, he started asking about the bills. Then the deed. Then the life insurance. He did the same thing to Allison in '09, she said, sipping her tea like it was acid. Same charm, same timing. Divorce was barely filed. He wormed in, emptied her Roth IRA by the time she realized he didn't even know her birthday. She leaned forward, locking eyes with me. He doesn't love Lynette. He doesn't want her. He saw the cracks, and he slid in. That's what he does. He moves in fast, attaches to vulnerable women with resources, and drains them. Then she said something that snapped something inside me. Your daughters? They're just collateral. Emotional currency. He'll use them to legitimize himself. Play father figure for just long enough to earn trust and access. Then poof. I didn't respond. Because deep down, I already knew. I just hadn't had the language for it yet. Not until I saw the pattern. Not until Emily drew the chalk outline around my life and pointed at the suspect holding the pen. Jeremy wasn't the threat. He was the opportunist. The threat was how easily my family opened the door. And now, I was done knocking. I didn't slam any doors. Didn't shred documents or smash picture frames. That's not how you win a quiet war. You win it like frostbite. Slow, invisible, and irreversible. I sat in the cab of my truck with a black coffee and a legal pad I hadn't touched since retirement. On the first line, I wrote one word: disconnect. Then I began. First, the cards. Lynette loved the Amex for emergency shopping. Funny how many shoes qualify as emergencies when you're not the one paying the bill. One phone call. 3 minutes. Gone. The joint visa that paid for takeout and hair appointments? Canceled. The Amazon account Grace and Olivia shared? Logged out. Password changed. Auto renewals turned off. Then the accounts. I froze the checking and savings, everything linked to the joint business we registered in both names back in 2008. She hadn't touched that LLC in years, but it still had her name on the paperwork. And she was about to find out what that meant when her debit card screamed decline. The mortgage still in my name. The vehicles? Same story, including the shiny crossover she called my sanctuary. Then came the trust. I called Gerald, our family's old estate attorney. The man had handwriting like a monk and a memory like a vault. Told him I wanted to reassign the executor role on the girl's trust. Quietly, without alerting Lynette. Legally, it was in my right. He didn't even hesitate. Who's your new executor? Ron, I said. Olivia's godfather. Retired civil engineer. Hardline ethics and no patience for drama. He was the only one in the family who never smiled when Jeremy walked into a room. Good choice, Gerald said. Want to set up contingencies? I smiled. Already wrote them. And then the girls. I paused before making the last call. Not because I didn't mean it, but because that one hurt. Not out of anger, but disappointment. Olivia's tuition was due in 3 weeks. Grace's senior trip deposit was scheduled to auto-draft in 6 days. I didn't cancel anything. I placed a hold. That's the part no one understands about control. Real power isn't in saying no. It's in making others wonder when yes will come back. I left just enough breathing room for questions. Just enough silence for discomfort. Just enough consequence to make them sit down and think. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. By day 3, the arrogance began to decay. Not collapse, decay. Slowly. Like a banana left in the sun. You don't notice it until it starts to stink. Lynette's first text was smug. 2 words. Your call. Like she still thought I'd slink back with my tail tucked, ready to beg for a seat at the table that used to be mine. The second message? We need to be civil about this. Civility, the favorite tool of the manipulator when control slips. The third. Where are you? The girls are asking. Now we were in the bargaining stage. She called once. Then twice. Left a voicemail. Can we just talk like adults? You left things unfinished. Unfinished? Lady, I finished you the moment I shut that front door. And then came the online theater. Grace, bless her PRN training heart, posted a family photo on Instagram, us at the Grand Canyon, from before the rot set in. Except she cropped me out. Literally. The caption read, "Change is hard, but necessary yellow heart sparkles." But the internet doesn't forgive as easily as teenage daughters think. First comment. Where's your dad? Second. Kinda weird to post this while he's MIA. Third. Jeremy's not your real father, right? Flush face. Grace didn't delete the comments. She just stopped replying. Olivia had her own moment of awakening at the campus bookstore. Tried to buy a stack of overpriced textbooks, swiped her card, and got that sweet little decline beep that echoes louder when you're standing in a crowd. She called Lynette. No answer. Then she called me. Also no answer. I watched the call flash across the burner screen I never answered and let it die like the illusion they'd all been living in. The beauty of silence is it forces people to hear their own echo. And right now, the echo in that house was starting to scream. Jeremy started moving in like a fungus. Quiet at first. Subtle. A few extra button-ups in the closet. His electric razor on the bathroom sink. A bottle of cologne in the master bedroom that smelled like desperation dipped in sandalwood. He started making jokes like, "Guess I live here now," and nobody laughed. But nobody stopped him either. He took my side of the bed. My seat at the dinner table. My damn parking spot. At one point, Grace, still drunk on whatever Kool-Aid Lynette had been serving, called him Jay. Just Jay. Hey Jay, can we go get smoothies after school? I almost choked on my coffee reading that in her text backup. She used to call me Dadster. Now I was deleted from the nickname registry like a discontinued appliance. But see, Jeremy wasn't built for staying power. He was a storm chaser. A parasite that needed emotional debris to latch onto. And what he walked into wasn't a grieving widow or a broken home. It was a slow, methodical, legal minefield. 2 days after he made his little, "I guess I'm stepdad now" speech while flipping pancakes in my kitchen, he got a letter. Hand-delivered. Certified mail. Courtesy of my new lawyer, Elaine, former military, zero tolerance for bullshit. The letter was short and sharp. "Mr. Collins, you are presently occupying a property that is under legal review regarding asset ownership and partition rights. At this time, you are trespassing. This is your only courtesy notice." I imagine Jeremy read it in the kitchen while Lynette tried to explain it away. It's just Darren trying to scare us. He doesn't mean it. Except I did. Every word. That night, sometime around 2:30 a.m., he vanished. Didn't pack his things. Didn't leave a note. Just evaporated. His toothbrush was still wet in the holder. Grace asked Lynette where Jay went. Lynette told her he needed time to process. Yeah. Process that he was about to be slapped with a restraining order if he so much as breathed near my front porch again. Jeremy didn't message Grace. Didn't call Olivia. Didn't even leave Lynette a voicemail. He ghosted the whole damn cast. Because the second the performance stopped being fun, he bolted, and the spotlight was back on them. Alone, in a house that suddenly felt too quiet. Because they never realized until he left. Jeremy wasn't the one holding things together. I was. They thought my absence would be a pause. Turns out, it was the beginning of free fall. By the end of that week, Reality caught up with them, paper by paper, invoice by invoice, decline by decline. No confrontation, no arguments, just cold, administrative gravity dragging their fantasy back to earth. Lynette tried to log into the joint business account, the one she hadn't touched in over a year, but had recently started eyeing again, probably thinking she could keep up appearances. Password rejected. She tried the reset. Security question didn't match. Why? Because I changed the recovery email 2 months ago to one she didn't even know existed. I got the notification. Failed login attempt. User, Lynette Halpern. Good try. The truck? That sleek little mid-sized pickup she called her baby in front of the PTA? Repossessed at 6:45 a.m. sharp, 2 days after Jeremy ghosted. I'd let her keep it for show until she tried to register it under her own name. Too bad it was still leased under mine. The repo guys told me she came out barefoot, in a robe, yelling something about how there must be a mistake. They towed it with her Yeti tumbler still in the cup holder. The electricity stayed on. I wasn't a monster. But the internet? That yearly prepaid plan I'd always insisted on, just in case? I let it expire. No Wi-Fi. No Netflix. No online grocery orders. Just dead silence and buffering wheels. Even Olivia texted me. Olivia, hey, internet's out. Can you call the provider? I stared at it for 5 minutes before deleting it. Let her ask Lynette. Let Lynette call the provider and find out she's not authorized. Let them all sit there and wait for something to work that never will again. And the bills? Stacking like bricks in a tomb. Property tax notices. Credit card late fees. The HOA letter with its passive-aggressive, friendly reminder tone. None of it in Jeremy's name. All of it tied to me. And I was gone. No phone calls. No texts. No dramatic return. Just absence. But it wasn't quiet. My silence had become thunder, the kind that rolls in slow, low, and relentless. Not yelling. Not scolding. Just reminding them, every single day, that the only thing holding their world together was the man they voted off the island. And now? They were living on driftwood. I parked 4 houses down. Didn't want them to see me coming, not yet. Let them sit in that borrowed silence a little longer. Black shirt, pressed. Watch reset to 0. Boots shine like it was inspection day. I hadn't dressed for them. I dressed for me. For the man they forgot still existed under the dad jokes and weekend grilling. The walk up the driveway felt surgical. Every step was deliberate. I could hear the wind chimes clinking on the porch, same as always. But inside, different rhythm now. Hollow. Like the house was finally aware that its pulse had stopped. I opened the door without knocking. Still had a key. Still had rights. The air inside was stiff, like someone had Febrezed overwrought. Grace was sitting on the stairs. Phone in hand, mouth slightly open like she was frozen mid-scroll. Olivia peeked from the hallway, holding a mug she wasn't drinking from. Lynette? She was in the kitchen. Still barefoot. Still wearing the robe from the repo morning. She froze when she saw me. I didn't speak. Not even a nod. Just walked past them, into the hallway, like I lived there. Because I had. I opened the hall closet, bottom shelf, under the board games and forgotten ski gloves. The brown leather photo album. The original one. Not the digital scrapbooks they made later for Facebook clout. This one had Polaroids, pressed petals, drawings from kindergarten stuck between the pages. My fingers didn't shake. I tucked the album under my arm and turned. Lynette stepped forward like I'd triggered muscle memory. Please, she said, voice cracking on the second syllable. At least talk to your daughters. I looked at them. 2 girls. My blood. My world. My name written on every school form and bedtime story and scraped knee band-aid. But now, they looked like witnesses. Not daughters. Not anymore. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't change my tone. Just spoke clearly enough that they'd remember it for the rest of their lives. They chose who their father was, I said, not blinking. And now they have him. Then I walked out. Didn't slam the door. Didn't pause to see if anyone followed. I didn't need to. Because I could already feel the house breaking behind me, slowly, painfully, beautifully. That evening, I hosted dinner. Not at home, at a little place on the edge of town. Old stone patio, dim lighting. The kind of restaurant where conversations are meant to be slow and intentional. I'd booked it under a different name. Didn't want whispers. This wasn't about revenge. This was ceremony. 6 chairs. One left empty. We sat outside under the string lights, cool air brushing over the tablecloths. Emily sat to my right, quietly studying the wine list like she was decoding scripture. Across from her, my niece, sharp as a blade, dressed like truth and tired of watching people lie. To my left, Elaine, my new lawyer, with a dossier by her side and eyes that didn't miss a thing. The seat at the head of the table? Mine. The empty chair? Symbolic. That seat had once belonged to the people who thought I'd always be there. People who cashed in on my loyalty like it was infinite credit. Now? Vacant. The food arrived slow. Talk was lighter than you'd expect. No bitterness. Just a kind of calm that follows a long, clean incision. I raised my glass, not for a toast, but to lock in the silence. The kind that says, I survived you, and now you'll live with that knowledge. Someone at a nearby table recognized me. Snapped a photo. I didn't stop them. By midnight, that photo was online. A wide shot. Dim glow. Familiar faces. One empty seat. Olivia saw it first. Her message came in around 12:37 a.m. Olivia, so we're just erased now? I didn't respond. What could I say? She hit the nail harder than she realized. A minute later, she checked the comments. There weren't many. Just one that stood out. Beneath the image. Some people only miss things once they're gone. And I think that's when it hit her. This wasn't exile. This was inheritance. They inherited a silence that now sat heavier than any speech I could have delivered. And that chair? Still empty. Still waiting. But never again for them. It was just after 7 a.m. when Lynette opened the front door. She wasn't dressed yet. Baggy t-shirt, tired eyes, her hair pulled back in a lazy bun that said she hadn't really slept. The porch was damp from an early drizzle. The air smelled like wet concrete, and whatever panic feels like when it finally wakes up before you do. The package was small. Plain brown paper. No return address. Just her name in careful, blocky handwriting. She picked it up like it might explode. Inside, no padding, no fluff, just 3 things. First, the final divorce decree. Signed. Sealed. Effective immediately. No appeals. No more waiting. The document didn't just end the marriage. It severed the last legal tether holding her to anything mine. Second, a bound copy of the revised trust. The cover page read, Beneficiary Administrator, Ronald H. Whitmore, Executor of Trust Assets, Property Holdings, and Educational Disbursements. Olivia's godfather, the man who once built her a treehouse. The same man Lynette told me was too rigid to ever be involved in family decisions. Now he held the keys to the future she thought she could manipulate. And third, a single folded page. White. Handwritten. My words. I walked out quietly, but the silence carried everything. She read it once, then again, and the porch got colder. She looked deeper into the box, as if hoping that was the end. It wasn't. Underneath the letter was a photo. The last family photo we ever took. One of those fake happy Christmas card shots by the tree, everyone dressed in matching sweaters, smiling like they weren't already rotting inside. But my face? Cleanly, surgically torn out. Not scribbled. Not burned. Torn. Like I had never been there. And now? I wasn't. Not in their house. Not in their finances. Not in their future. Just an outline where the father used to be. A silence that echoed louder than any goodbye ever could. The first punch to the gut wasn't the words. It was the silence that followed. A suffocating, bottomless silence that stretched between us, heavier than the years we had spent pretending. Rachel had always been good at this, timing her words like a sniper. She knew exactly when to pull the trigger. And she just had. I stood there, watching my daughter, twirl in front of the boutique mirror, the wedding dress cascading around her like something out of a goddamn fairy tale. She was smiling, lost in her own world, the way she had been when she was 5 years old, riding her first bike down the driveway, screaming with joy because she finally got it. Back then, she fell a few times. But she got back up. And now, 20 years later, I was the one crashing to the pavement. Rachel stepped closer, just enough for her perfume to reach me, just enough for her voice to slice through my ribs. You're not walking her down the aisle. My mind blanked. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. Excuse me. Rachel's lips barely moved, but her words dripped like venom. Mark will be walking her down. Her real father. The boutique seemed to tilt. I gripped the back of a nearby chair, steadying myself as a laugh, sharp, disbelieving, almost escaped my throat. Rachel, what the hell are you talking about? She tilted her head, examining me like I was some slow student who just wasn't getting it. It's time, Daniel. You've played your role, and we appreciate it. But this is what's best for Emily. Best for Emily? My pulse pounded. My mouth went dry. I should have seen this coming. The warning signs had been everywhere, subtle at first, then bolder, louder. The way Rachel had gradually started pushing me to the edges of wedding planning. The way Mark had begun showing up more, his presence bleeding into places he didn't belong. The way Emily, my little girl, had been conditioned, trained to see something I wasn't ready to face. I had been blind. Rachel reached into her purse, her movements practiced, elegant. When she pulled out a small black envelope, she didn't hand it to me. She just held it up between two fingers, the way you'd hold a piece of trash before tossing it away. Here, she said smoothly. The official invitation. It should clear up any confusion. I didn't move. I just stared at it. I had helped pay for this wedding. I had raised this girl. And now, she was sending me a fucking invitation? Rachel sighed, her patience wearing thin. You'll have a great seat. A guest seat. Something inside me snapped so quietly, so effortlessly, that even I barely noticed it. I took the envelope, my fingers pressing into the thick cardstock as I opened it. My name was there printed neatly, formally, distantly. Daniel Carter. Underneath, the words, guest of the bride. Not father of the bride. Not even family. Just guest. Rachel must have seen something shift in my face, because her expression flickered, just for a second. A smirk tried to form, but I caught something underneath it. A hesitation. A flicker of something she wasn't ready to name. Fear. She thought she had checkmated me. That I'd nod, grip my teeth, and swallow this like every other quiet humiliation she'd dealt me over the years. She didn't realize I had already stepped off the board. I nodded. Slowly. Quietly. All right, I murmured. Rachel blinked. That wasn't the reaction she expected. Her smirk twitched, her fingers tightening around her purse. Good, she said smoothly. I knew you'd understand. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that reached my eyes. Not the kind of smile that meant forgiveness. The kind of smile that hides a match before it's struck. She didn't know. She didn't know that the second she walked away, I was going to start pulling every thread. She didn't know that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The garage had always been my sanctuary. A place of order. A place where things made sense. When the world inside the house felt like a slow-burning wreck, I could come here, tinker with the old Chevy, organize my tools, drown in the quiet hum of normalcy. But tonight, the garage wasn't quiet. It was breathing. The wind rattled against the door, the fluorescent light flickered once, and then, just as I was about to shut the place down for the night, my foot kicked against something. A box. One of Rachel's old storage bins, half covered in dust and wedged behind a shelf like it had been shoved there in a hurry. At first, I almost ignored it. Another relic from our past life, from the days when our marriage still held the illusion of stability. But then I saw it. The corner of a folder sticking out, peeking at me like some kind of dirty little secret. I crouched, pulling it free, and something in my gut twisted. It wasn't just any folder. It was black, worn at the edges, and I recognized the neat handwriting on the tab instantly. Rachel's. I opened it. The first thing I saw was a stack of letters. Yellowed slightly with time, the ink smudged in places, but the words were still clear as day. Emily must never know. She has to believe Mark is her father. It's safer this way. Daniel is too stupid to figure it out. The world stopped. Everything around me, the tools, the car, the wind, ceased to exist. My eyes locked onto that last line, that one cruelly casual sentence that pulled the ground right out from under me. Too stupid to figure it out. I stared at it for so long that the letters started to blur, the ink bleeding into itself. And then, slowly, carefully, I exhaled. Cold. That was the only way to describe it. The way the heat drained from my body. The way my pulse steadied into something frighteningly calm. I flipped through the pages. Letter after letter. Plans. Conversations. Instructions. Rachel, guiding Mark like a puppet master. A carefully constructed narrative, years in the making, weaving a lie so deep that even I had believed it. Too stupid to figure it out. A slow, humorless chuckle bubbled up from my throat. They thought I was an idiot. They thought I was some blind, pathetic fool who had spent 20 years raising a daughter that wasn't mine, pouring my love, my time, my life into a lie. They thought I would just sit back and take it. Rachel had always been calculating, but she had made one mistake. She had underestimated me. My fingers tightened around the folder, knuckles pressing into the paper. She thought she had already won. But this wasn't the end of the game. This was just the beginning. The nurse smiled as she swabbed the inside of my cheek. "Routine health check, huh?" she asked, jotting something down on her clipboard. I nodded. "Yeah, just covering all my bases." She didn't question it. Why would she? I was a 60-year-old firefighter. People expected us to be paranoid about our health. Smoke inhalation, stress, the job, it wears you down. Nobody bats an eye when a guy like me orders a test. But this wasn't about my health. This was war. I walked out of the clinic with the test kit sealed and labeled, my hands steady, my heartbeat eerily calm. I'd mailed it out within the hour. Now, all I had to do was wait, and dig. That night, while Rachel was out at her bachelorette circus with Emily and her bridesmaids, I went back into the garage, not to fix the car, not to escape, to finish what I started. I had spent 20 years believing a lie, believing that I was Emily's father by blood. But those letters? They had shoved me into an abyss, one where every memory I cherished had been laced with manipulation. But if there was one thing that I could still control, it was the truth. I pulled the heavy metal storage chest from the back of the garage, the one I hadn't touched in years. Dust billowed up as I flipped it open, rifling through old tax records, house deeds, pay stubs. Where the hell was it? And then I found it. A thick envelope. Yellowed at the edges, sealed with a paperclip. My name scrawled across it in legal handwriting. I opened it and let the papers spill out into my hands. And my whole world tilted. The adoption decree. Signed. Dated. Finalized in 2003. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat as I scanned the lines. Petitioner, Daniel Carter. Minor, Emily Carter, formerly Emily Sinclair. Parental rights, Rachel Sinclair relinquished partial guardianship upon marriage to petitioner. No other paternal claims filed or recognized by the state. I read it again, and again. Then I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh that cut through the suffocating silence of the garage. Rachel had spent years crafting her lie, convincing Mark, convincing Emily, convincing herself that she had full control over who was and wasn't her father. But she had forgotten something. Forgotten that I had gone through every legal step to make Emily mine when she was a child. I wasn't just some stepfather. I wasn't just a placeholder. I was, in the eyes of the law, the only father that mattered. Rachel's whole scheme, the grand performance, the invitation labeling me as a guest, the smug satisfaction in her voice when she told me I wasn't walking Emily down the aisle. It was all built on sand. Because no matter what Rachel or Mark believed, no matter what lies they had whispered into Emily's ear over the years, I was still her father. And now? Now it was only a matter of time before they realized it. I gathered the papers, tucking them into a secure file. Then I picked up my phone, pulled up my email, and checked the status of the DNA test. Processing. Good. Because once I had that, once I had everything in place, Rachel and Mark wouldn't even see it coming. I sat across from Greg in his dimly lit office, the old wooden desk between us covered in neatly stacked case files and half-empty coffee cups. The place smelled like burnt espresso and legal battles won through sheer force of will. Greg had been a paramedic before he became a lawyer, a warhorse in both fields. The kind of guy who had seen too many people die on the pavement and too many bastards walk away free in the courtroom. Now, in his 60s, he didn't waste time on pleasantries. He skimmed the adoption papers I had placed in front of him, his sharp eyes moving quickly over the text. When he finally looked up, his lips pulled into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like the kind of expression a man makes when he's about to watch someone else walk into a legal buzzsaw. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "this is going to be fun." I exhaled, my grip tightening around the arms of the chair. "I need you to spell it out for me, Greg. I need to know exactly where I stand." He tossed the papers onto his desk. Where you stand." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Daniel, you're sitting on a goddamn throne, and Rachel doesn't even know it yet." I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. "So what? This adoption makes you the only legal father Emily has." He tapped the papers for emphasis. "Even if Mark's DNA test comes back as a match, it doesn't mean jack shit in court. Biology stopped matching the second this adoption was finalized. The law only recognizes you as Emily's father." Something hot and ugly coiled in my chest. Then how the hell was Rachel planning to get away with this? My voice came out sharp, edged with something dangerous. Greg smirked. "She was counting on you being a sucker." I clenched my jaw. "She figured you'd roll over," he continued, casually flipping through the documents. "She thought you'd sulk, maybe drink a little too much at the reception, and then just fade out of the picture. Let Mark slide into your place." I let out a slow, measured breath. "And legally?" Greg's eyes darkened with something almost amused. "Legally, Mark is about as important to Emily's life as the mailman. He has zero parental rights. He could show up to that wedding in a damn superhero cape, call himself Super Dad in front of all the guests, and it wouldn't change a damn thing." I sat back, staring at the ceiling, trying to process it all. 20 years. 20 years I had spent raising my daughter, loving her, protecting her, while Rachel had been quietly rewriting the story behind my back. And all this time, she thought she had control. She thought she could erase me. But she had built her house of lies on a foundation she had long since forgotten about. I wasn't just Emily's father. I was her only father. Greg tapped the desk, bringing me back. "So what's the play, Danny?" I met his gaze. Rachel thought she had already won. Mark probably thought he had secured his moment of glory. Emily, God, Emily. She was caught in the middle, unknowingly being used like a pawn. I inhaled deeply, let the rage settle into something sharper, something colder. I straightened in my chair, voice calm, steady. "The play," I said. I smiled. "They don't even know they've already lost." I poured myself a glass of bourbon, letting the amber liquid swirl lazily in the glass. The ice clinked softly, the sound almost peaceful. Almost. Rachel sat across from me at the kitchen table, legs crossed, her manicured nails tapping against the wood in that rhythmic, calculated way she did when she was pretending to be patient. She had been watching me carefully, no doubt waiting for signs of a fight, waiting for some last pathetic attempt at rebellion. I had given her nothing. I had played my role. I had nodded along when she told me Mark would be walking Emily down the aisle. I had forced my shoulders to sag just a little when she mentioned how hard this was for everyone. I had let my silence be misread as surrender. And now? Now she was here to collect her next little victory. "I need the family jewelry back." She said it so smoothly, like it was just a natural request. Not a demand. Not a final insult wrapped in civility. I took a slow sip of bourbon, letting the burn sit on my tongue before swallowing. Emily's wedding jewelry had been in my family for generations. A set of antique gold pieces passed down from fathers to daughters. When Emily was born, I had taken them out of my mother's old chest and held them in my hands, feeling the weight of history, the responsibility. I had promised myself that one day, when the time was right, I'd place them in Emily's hands myself. Rachel had other ideas. I set my glass down with a soft thud. "All right." Her perfectly shaped brows lifted slightly. She hadn't expected that. "Good," she said smoothly, recovering fast. "I'll have them cleaned before the ceremony." I nodded, swirling the glass absent-mindedly, pretending to be deep in thought. "Yeah, makes sense." I saw it then, the shift in her posture. The way her fingers tightened slightly around the armrest of her chair. She thought she had finally broken me. That's what Rachel always wanted. Not just to win, but to see the moment her opponent folded. I drained the rest of my bourbon and stood up, stretching slightly, letting out a long exhale like a man who had finally accepted his fate. Then I turned toward the safe. She watched me like a hawk, her smugness barely concealed under that polished mask of indifference. I punched in the code, the lock clicked, and I pulled out a velvet-lined box. Rachel's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. I handed it to her, and she took it without hesitation, already imagining the scene. Mark, slipping the bracelet onto Emily's wrist, fastening the necklace, placing the earrings, as if they were his to give. I leaned against the counter, rubbing my jaw as she examined the box, her her fingers ghosting over the surface. It took everything in me not to laugh. Because here's what she didn't know. The jewelry? The real set? It wasn't in that box. It had been placed into a trust months ago. A trust that bore Emily's name, ensuring that no one, not Rachel, not Mark, not any future snake that slithered into their lives, could touch them. Rachel thought she was holding victory in her hands. All she had was a worthless replica. I watched her closely as she stood, smoothing her dress, preparing to leave. And then, just as she turned, just as she was about to walk out of my house with her stolen prize, I gave her one last gift. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. Her shoulders tensed, just slightly. She hesitated. She felt it. The shift in the air. But she wouldn't figure it out. Not yet. Let her celebrate. Let her feel untouchable. Because when the truth came crashing down, when she realized just how badly she had miscalculated, that moment would be priceless. The church was packed. Guests murmured in hushed excitement, craning their necks as the music swelled. The grand oak doors at the back creaked open, and all eyes turned. Emily. She stood at the entrance, radiant in lace and soft candlelight, clutching a bouquet so tightly. But she wasn't nervous about the wedding. She wasn't nervous at all. She was just happy. Happy because she thought everything was exactly as it should be. Because Rachel had spent years whispering the right words in her ear, shaping the perfect narrative. Because Mark, standing beside her in a crisp tux, was the man she now believed to be her father. He offered her his arm with that same slimy confidence I had spent 2 decades tolerating. And she took it, smiling up at him, completely unaware of the truth. They walked, step by step, closer to the altar, closer to the moment Rachel had been waiting for. The moment she could erase me from history like a stain she had finally scrubbed clean. I sat near the front, silent, still, but my pulse was steady, because I knew what was coming. They reached the front of the church. The priest cleared his throat, preparing to begin, and then the lights cut out. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. The sudden darkness swallowed the murmurs, leaving only confusion. Then, click. A soft hum. A projector, flickering to life. The massive white screen behind the altar, meant to display childhood photos of Emily and Mark, the fairy tale slideshow Rachel had painstakingly prepared, now showed something else. Something real. Rachel's face appeared first. Grainy, low-lit security footage. She was sitting across from a man in a cheap motel room. The officiant frowned. People shifted in their seats. Rachel's voice, tinny through the speakers, echoed through the church. Make it say Mark's the father. I don't care what the real results are. The silence was deafening. Rachel shot up from her seat, eyes wild, lips parting too late. The video kept rolling. How much? $5,000. Cash. The camera caught the moment she slid the envelope across the table. Someone in the audience gasped. Rachel turned toward me, face contorted in fury. Turn that off. I leaned back in my seat, exhaling dramatically. Oh, I don't think we're done yet. The footage cut to another screen. A manila folder. A legal document, displayed in crisp, high resolution. Greg's voice, my lawyer, came through loud and clear. The law is simple. Daniel Carter is the only recognized legal parent of Emily Carter. Her adoption in 2003 nullifies any biological claim. Even if Mark Sinclair shares DNA, he has no parental rights. None. The guest started whispering loudly now. I looked over. Emily. Her face had lost all color. Her lips were parted in pure, frozen disbelief. Mark? He had gone pale. Rachel? She looked like she wanted to rip the projector off the wall with her bare hands. I stood. Slowly. Casually. Rachel's voice finally found its way out of her throat. You bastard. I raised a hand, silencing her like a schoolteacher shutting up a rowdy child. Now. This is Emily's big day. Let's not make a scene. Mark's fists clenched. You son of a... Oh, Mark, I sighed, shaking my head. I'd be more careful with that temper of yours. Wouldn't want to add assault to your list of upcoming legal troubles. Emily spun toward Rachel, eyes blazing. Tell me this isn't real. Rachel opened her mouth. Closed it. She looked around, as if searching for an escape hatch. The guests were no longer whispering. They were openly staring. I gave Rachel my best shit-eating grin. Then I turned to Emily, my voice steady, calm. Sweetheart, I said. Would you like me to play it again? The church was no longer a place of peace. It was a battlefield. The murmurs had swelled into a full-blown uproar, guests shifting uncomfortably in their seats, whispers turning into sharp, audible gasps. The video had shattered the illusion Rachel had spent 2 decades crafting, and now there was nothing left but the wreckage. I stepped forward, reaching into my jacket pocket as I slowly turned to face the crowd. "Since some of you might still be confused," I said, voice carrying over the chaos, "I thought I'd make things a little easier." I pulled out a neatly stacked bundle of papers, crisp and clean, and let them fall onto the first row of pews. The pages scattered like fallen leaves, tumbling into eager hands. Rachel's face twisted. "What the hell are you doing?" I smirked. "Oh, just sharing some light reading." Guests grabbed the papers, I scanning the documents, confusion quickly turning to shock. Legal adoption records, bank transfers, evidence, everything laid out in black and white, proof that Emily had always been mine, and that Rachel had been funneling money to Mark for years. The murmurs turned into outright shouting. Emily snatched a paper from a nearby guest, her hands trembling as she read. Rachel lunged forward, trying to grab it. "Give me that." But Emily was already backing away, shaking her head in disbelief. "You lied to me," she whispered, voice cracking. Then, louder, "You lied to me." Rachel held up her hands. "Sweetheart, listen, it's not." Emily's whole body shook with fury. "You stole my father from me." The words ripped through the church, silencing everything. Rachel flinched, her mask finally slipping, her desperation visible now. Mark, on the other hand, wasn't looking at Emily. He was looking at the guests, at the widening eyes and murmurs of disgust, at the realization that he wasn't just being exposed, he was being buried. And then, the final nail in his coffin. A deep, authoritative voice cut through the noise. "Mark Sinclair." The room turned. A sheriff stood at the entrance of the church, hand resting on his belt, a pair of cuffs gleaming at his side. Mark froze. The sheriff stepped forward, holding up a document. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Fraud, document tampering, and conspiracy to commit financial misconduct." Rachel whipped around. No, this isn't happening." Mark bolted. Or at least, he tried to. He barely made it 3 steps before the sheriff's deputy grabbed him, twisting his arms behind his back and shoving him against the pew. A stunned hush settled over the guests as the sound of metal clicking shut echoed through the church. Mark thrashed. "Rachel, do something." Rachel stumbled back, her face ashen. For the first time, she realized there was nothing left to do. I exhaled, feeling the weight finally lift from my chest. Rachel turned to Emily, pleading. "Sweetheart, please, Emily took a step back. Then another. Her wedding dress, the one I had helped her pick, floated like a ghost around her feet, her breath shallow, eyes filled with rage. Rachel reached out. Emily slapped her hand away. "You disgust me." Rachel flinched like she'd been slapped. Mark was being hauled toward the entrance, still shouting. The guests didn't move. They just watched. And then Emily turned. To me. Her father. Her real father. And she did the one thing I hadn't expected. She took my hand. Tightly. Fiercely. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't shaking anymore. "Walk me down the aisle." Rachel collapsed into a pew, sobbing. And I smiled. Cold. Controlled. Victorious. The silence after Rachel's collapse was deafening. The kind that stretches long enough to make people uncomfortable, long enough for reality to set in like a slow, creeping poison. Emily stood frozen, her fingers still clutching mine. The weight of the moment hung between us, the years of deception unraveling in real time, each revelation a fresh wound. Then, with a shaky breath, she let go. Her hands trembled as she reached up, fingers catching the delicate lace of her veil, the final piece of the illusion. And then, she ripped it off. Gasps rippled through the guests, but she didn't care. She wasn't looking at them. She was looking at me. The veil slipped from her fingers, crumpling onto the floor like a discarded lie. Her eyes, wide and filled with something raw, anger, sadness, relief, searched my face. "You," she whispered, voice barely holding steady. I swallowed. Then, louder this time, stronger. "You were always my dad." Rachel jerked upright, eyes wild with panic. "Emily, no." Emily turned on her so fast that Rachel actually flinched. "You lied to me," she spat. "For years." Rachel's lips trembled. "Sweetheart, I was protecting you." Emily let out a hollow laugh. "From who? The man who raised me? Who was there for every scraped knee, every school recital, every damn thing?" Rachel shook her head, reaching for her. "Baby, please, you don't understand. Don't touch me." Rachel's hands dropped. Emily's breathing was sharp, uneven. And then, slowly, she turned away from her mother, away from the wreckage, and faced me again. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. And then, in front of everyone, she took my arm. The collective gasp from the guests barely registered. The heat of Rachel's stare burned against my skin, but I didn't look at her. I only looked at Emily. Her fingers curled around my arm, a silent declaration. A choice. I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to break. I squeezed her hand gently, my voice low. "Are you sure?" Emily exhaled, then nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything." Mark, still restrained at the back, snarled. "This is bullshit. He's not your father." A shadow moved. Emily's fiancé. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, placing himself directly in Mark's path. His voice was calm, lethal. "I think you're done talking." Mark's mouth opened, then snapped shut when Emily's fiancé didn't so much as blink. The sheriff behind him tightened the cuffs. Emily didn't even turn around. She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, then whispered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "He was always my father." Rachel let out a small, broken sob. Mark struggled. "And me?" I stood there, my daughter at my side, my spine straight, my heart full, and smiled. Because for the first time in 20 years, I had won. Rachel sat stiffly in the courtroom, her perfectly tailored suit doing nothing to hide the way her hands gripped the table. The confidence she once wielded like a weapon was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar on her face, fear. Mark was beside her, wrist shackled, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. He wasn't listening. He was too busy glaring at the judge, at me, at the evidence stacked neatly on the table between us. The final reckoning had arrived. The judge adjusted her glasses, shuffling the papers in front of her with slow, deliberate movements. After reviewing the evidence, she began, her voice steady, unwavering. "This court finds that Rachel Sinclair knowingly falsified DNA records and engaged in financial misconduct. As such, her claim to alimony is hereby denied, and her rights to any joint marital assets, including the primary residence, are revoked." Rachel gasped. The room stirred. A ripple of murmurs. Rachel shot up, panic bleeding into her voice. "Your Honor, you don't understand." The judge barely looked at her. "I understand plenty, Mrs. Sinclair." She turned a page. "Furthermore, given the overwhelming proof of financial fraud between the defendants, the court is prepared to proceed with sentencing for Mr. Mark Sinclair." Mark jerked against his cuffs. "This is insane. I was lied to too. She told me." The judge silenced him with a single look. "Mr. Sinclair, you knowingly accepted falsified documents, participated in deception for financial gain, and attempted to claim parental rights where none existed. As such, the court finds you guilty of fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy." A beat of silence. Then, "You are hereby sentenced to 4 years in federal prison." Rachel let out a strangled sob. Mark's face drained of all color. "No. And oh, this is her fault." He turned toward Rachel, his voice dripping with betrayal. "You promised me." "Mark, shut up." Rachel hissed, voice cracking, but it was over. The bailiff stepped forward. The cuffs rattled as Mark was yanked to his feet, his protests cut off as he was dragged toward the door. Rachel barely breathed, hands shaking as she turned toward me, her eyes wide, desperate. I could see it, the last remnants of control slipping through her fingers like sand. "You can't do this," she whispered, voice trembling. "You can't just take everything from me." I stood slowly, buttoning my jacket, letting the silence stretch long enough for her to feel it. Then I leaned in, just enough for my words to reach her and no one else. "I didn't take anything from you, Rachel," I murmured. "You did that all by yourself." She opened her mouth, but no words came. The gavel came down. Case closed. Rachel collapsed back into her seat, eyes hollow. And I turned, walking out of that courtroom free. A week later, The papers were signed. The house, Rachel's prized possession, the thing she had fought so hard to control, was no longer hers. I didn't keep it, didn't sell it. Instead, I handed the deed over to the Chicago Children's Fund, turning it into a home for foster kids, the kind of place I wished had existed for me when I was young. Rachel found out through the news. I never checked to see where she ended up after that, because, for the first time in 20 years, I didn't care. The smell of barbecue filled the crisp autumn air as laughter rang out across the backyard of what used to be Rachel's house, now a home for kids who had nowhere else to go. I stood near the grill, flipping burgers, watching as a group of kids ran across the lawn, dodging between tables, their faces smeared with frosting from the cake one of the guys had brought over from the station. This wasn't just another day. It was a celebration, the first of what would become a tradition, an annual gathering for the kids, a place where they could feel like they belonged. My firehouse crew had shown up in full force. Off-duty, relaxed, tossing footballs, telling stories, sneaking extra marshmallows to the younger ones when they thought no one was looking. Emily stood near the patio, watching it all, a soft smile on her face. She had been quiet these past few weeks, processing, healing. We both had. I still wasn't sure how much she had forgiven Rachel, or if she ever would. But she had made her choice that day in the church, and she had never looked back. As I pulled the last burger off the grill, she walked over, hands tucked behind her back. "Hey, old man," she teased. "Got a second?" I smirked. "For you? Always." She pulled something from behind her back and held it out. A framed photograph. I took it carefully, my fingers brushing the edge of the glass. It was us. A picture from years ago. Emily, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on my shoulders, both of us grinning, faces smudged with ice cream. The words etched into the bottom of the frame made my throat tighten. My real hero. I swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in my eyes. Emily bit her lip. "I figured you should have a reminder. Not that you need one." I exhaled a soft chuckle, pulling her into a tight hug. "Thank you, kiddo." She squeezed back just as fiercely. Across town, in a dimly lit motel room, Rachel sat on the edge of a stiff, cheap mattress, staring blankly at the TV screen. The local news played a segment. Former firefighter turns old home into a foster center for children in need. The camera panned across the celebration, showing the backyard, the kids, the laughter. Then, me and Emily. Her holding the picture. Me hugging her. Rachel's fingers curled into the thin motel blanket. The news anchor's voice was warm. A true example of what fatherhood is really about. Love, not just blood. Rachel reached for the remote and shut the TV off. The screen went black. The room was silent. She was alone. Back at the party, Emily pulled back from our hug, wiping at her eyes. She glanced around at the kids, the firefighters, the life we had built from the wreckage of the past. Then she looked up at me, smiling softly. "Dad, yeah." She nodded toward the fire pit where the younger kids were roasting marshmallows. "Race you?" I grinned. "You're on." The letter arrived on a cold November morning, tucked between utility bills and charity solicitations. A plain white envelope with no return address, but I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. "Rachel." I took my time, poured a cup of coffee, let the steam rise as I turned the envelope over in my hands. Then, finally, I slid my thumb under the seal and pulled out the letter. The handwriting was rushed, messy, desperate. "Daniel. Mark told me everything." I smirked. "Of course he did. I know you hate me, but you have to understand, I did what I thought was right for Emily. I wanted her to have the best life possible." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Even now, she couldn't just admit it. She couldn't just say, "I lied. I manipulated. I destroyed. I'm alone, Daniel. I lost everything. And Emily, she won't even return my calls." That part made my chest tighten, just for a moment. Because for all the hell Rachel had put us through, for all the pain and deception, she was still Emily's mother. And now, she had nothing. "Please. I just want to talk to my daughter. I deserve that. You know I do." Then, the final line. "Give her back to me." My fingers clenched. I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. Not let me see her. Not let me explain. Give her back to me. Like Emily was an object. A possession. Something to be handed over, traded, controlled. I exhaled sharply, folding the letter once, twice, pressing my thumb against the crease. Then, without another thought, I stood, walked across the room, and opened the iron doors of the fireplace. The flames crackled, hungry and alive. I held the letter over them, watching as the edges curled, blackened, turned to embers. Rachel's last attempt at control burned to nothing. As the paper disintegrated, I murmured, almost to myself, "Ash makes the best soil for new beginnings." Then I shut the fireplace doors and walked away, leaving the past where it belonged. The air was crisp with the first hints of autumn, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows over the courtyard of the Foster Center. The place was alive, kids laughing, firefighters chatting, the scent of barbecue lingering from earlier in the afternoon. At the front of the gathering, Emily stood beside me, her hands clasped in front of her, her engagement ring catching the light. She had insisted on this moment, on this ceremony, and I knew why. It wasn't just about me. It was about what we had built from the wreckage. A black cloth covered the memorial plaque mounted beside the front doors. Emily took a deep breath, glancing at me, her eyes filled with something warm, something steady. "Ready, Dad?" "Dad." A year ago, I had nearly lost that title. Now, it was more solid than ever. I nodded. "Let's do it." Together, we pulled the cloth away. The polished bronze gleamed in the sunlight, the words carved deep into the metal. Carter Children's Center. Family is a choice, not just blood. A wave of emotion surged in my chest, but I held steady. The crowd erupted in applause, but my eyes stayed on the words. A choice. I had made mine. Emily had made hers. And Rachel. Rachel had made hers, too. I caught a glimpse of movement beyond the gate, near the sidewalk. A lone figure stood there, half hidden in the shadows. Rachel. She wasn't close enough to be seen by anyone else. She was just watching. Her hair was pulled into a tight knot, her coat too thin for the weather. She looked smaller than I remembered. Weaker. She hadn't sent another letter, hadn't called. But she was here. And when the kids' laughter rang out, when the sound of their joy filled the air, bouncing off the old bricks of the house she had once claimed as her own, Rachel flinched. I saw it. The way her lips parted just slightly. The way her shoulders tensed, as if she had just been hit by something she hadn't expected. She stared at the plaque, reading the words. And then, without a word, she turned and walked away. Not a plea. Not a final attempt at control. Just gone. Emily exhaled beside me, squeezing my arm gently. "You okay?" I let out a slow breath, my gaze lingering on the spot where Rachel had stood. Then I smiled. Never better. The past was behind us. And in front of us? Everything else. "You're pathetic," my daughter said, loud enough that the clinking of forks and wine glasses stopped cold. "You left Mom over something that happened 20 years ago. Grow up." She was standing, arms crossed, that condescending smirk on her face, my smirk, ironically, while my sister-in-law choked on her Pinot Grigio and the turkey carved 5 minutes ago began to cool. The entire dining room, packed with relatives I barely tolerated even when I was still pretending to be happily married, went dead silent. The mashed potatoes were still steaming. My son-in-law froze mid-bite, looking like he wanted to disappear into the stuffing. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the glass of bourbon I was holding. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, the kind of smile that makes people deeply uncomfortable when they realize you know something they don't. Then I reached under the table, pulled out the plain manila folder I had brought in instead of dessert, and laid it in front of her like I was sliding over a legal contract. 2 sheets. Just 2. I tapped them once with my finger, looked her in the eye, and said, calm as ever, 30 minutes. Pack. She blinked, confused at first. Then the edges of her mouth twitched downward. She opened the folder with a performative huff, like she expected to find some kind of half-baked emotional letter about how hurt I was. Some desperate plea for understanding. She was wrong. She stared at the first page, the DNA report. Black text, white paper, government seal. Neatly highlighted in yellow was the phrase probability of paternity, 0%. Then she flipped to the second page. A printout with a photo of a man she didn't recognize. Under the photo, an address in Arizona. A business card was stapled to the corner, Marcus J. Holloway, financial advisor. The man who, 23 years ago, had apparently been more than just a friend to my wife. Her hand shook, not dramatically, just a slight tremble, enough for me to notice and enough for her to realize I noticed. She looked up, and her voice cracked for the first time in years. "What is this?" I sipped my bourbon. "A destination." Then I stood, adjusted my blazer, and said it again, this time louder, for the whole table, 30 minutes. "Pack." I didn't look at my ex-wife. I didn't need to. I could feel her tense across the table like a predator finally realizing the trap it just walked into. Her face flushed red, not from embarrassment, but from calculation. The silence was so thick, even the dog stopped begging for scraps. My brother muttered, "What the hell is going on?" My niece tried to lighten the mood with a nervous chuckle. No one joined her. And me? I just stepped away from the table, left the dining room, and walked out the front door into the cold November air, lighting a cigarette I hadn't touched in over a decade. Let them sit in that. Let them marinate in it. Because here's what none of them knew. Not my daughter, not my ex, not the army of performative relatives. I didn't come to Thanksgiving to make peace. I came to bury the illusion. And the funeral had just started. It was 2:14 a.m. when my phone buzzed, one of those pathetic vibrations you ignore the first time because you're half asleep and assume it's spam. But then it buzzed again. And again. Persistent. I groaned, reached over Haley's childhood photo frame on the nightstand, and checked the screen. Unknown number. 3 missed calls. And now, a voicemail. I don't know what made me listen. Maybe it was the fact that my house had been so silent lately, like even the walls were holding their breath. Or maybe it was because something in me, something primal, knew the sound I was about to hear would change everything. I pressed play. Slurred. Male. Southern accent. The kind you pick up after a few years of cheap whiskey and too many failed marriages. I.e., Alex, you ever wonder why Haley doesn't look a damn thing like you? I froze. She's got my eyes, you know? I mean, your wife, ex-wife, whatever, she probably told you it was just a one-time thing, right? Funny, man. So funny. She used to call me when you were in Denver. Every damn time. Click. That was it. No name. No explanation. Just that. I sat up in bed, suddenly hyper-aware of every shadow in the room. The digital clock's blue glow seemed to burn my retinas. I replayed the voicemail 3 times. I knew that voice. I knew it. Something deep in the marrow of my bones recognized it. Marcus. Marcus Holloway. That scrawny, smug bastard from our office 20-some years ago. He used to flirt with every woman at the Christmas parties, had this thing where he'd wink like he was God's gift to finance. And back then, I didn't think twice of it. I was too busy building a life, paying mortgages, planning birthdays, replacing water heaters. I didn't have time for suspicion. But now, in the dead quiet of my bedroom, those words replayed in my head like a metronome from hell. She's got my eyes, she used to call me, when you were in Denver. I got up, walked to the bathroom, turned on the light, and looked at my reflection. Then I pulled a photo off the fridge. Haley at 16. Her senior portrait. My jaw. My hairline. My posture. But the eyes? Not mine. And not my wife's either. They were this weird golden brown, like burnt amber. I always chalked it up to some recessive gene on my wife's side. Her great aunt had eyes like that, I think. Or maybe it was just a trick of the light. But now? Now I couldn't stop staring at that damn photo. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I didn't toss or turn either. I just laid there, motionless, thinking, rewinding 2 decades of parenting and wondering what parts of it were real. I remembered Haley's first word, Dada. I remembered teaching her how to ride a bike. I remembered the time she broke her wrist climbing the neighbor's tree, and I sat in the ER for 7 hours holding her other hand. What if none of it mattered? What if I was just the idiot who paid for someone else's screw-up? The next morning, I didn't confront anyone. I didn't start screaming accusations. I didn't even return Marcus's call. That would have been too easy, too messy. Instead, I bought a DNA test online. 2 days shipping. $299. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't even hint. I just waited for Haley to come over for her weekly Sunday lunch, like nothing was wrong. She tossed her toothbrush into the bathroom drawer after freshening up. I slipped it into a sterile bag 10 minutes later. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd open the results and feel like a fool for doubting. that it was just a drunk idiot trying to stir up old flames. But that night, as I stood in the kitchen holding that tiny bag with a toothbrush and 20 years' worth of doubt, I realized something chilling. I wasn't hoping the test would clear my conscience. I was afraid it would confirm what I already knew. The email came at 11:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. Subject line, "Your DNA results are ready." I was sitting in my office, staring at a spreadsheet that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. I hadn't been able to focus for days. Every task I touched dissolved into white noise. Every email a pointless formality. The only tab that mattered was the one with the lab's tracking number, which I'd refreshed so often the browser started auto-loading it before I even finished typing. I opened the message. Heart not racing, not trembling, not even braced. I already knew. The PDF loaded slowly. My mouse hovered. One click. Paternity probability, 0%. I stared at it. Not with shock, not even with anger, just a dull, hollow awareness. Like staring at a gun that already went off, the bullet long gone. The damage already done. And then I laughed. I laughed so loud the guy in the office next to mine knocked on the wall and said, "Hey, you okay in there? What do you say to that?" "Yep, man. Just found out my daughter's not mine." You know, Tuesday stuff. The laughter wouldn't stop. It crawled up from somewhere deep in my gut and came out like dry heaving. I bent forward, clutching my stomach, choking on it. The kind of laughter you only ever hear in war movies, where the guy just lost his entire squad and laughs because it's the only thing left between him and total madness. I slammed the laptop shut, wiped my eyes, and sat there staring at the beige wall in front of me like it held answers. Nothing moved. The blinds swayed slightly from the air vent. That was it. Everything else in my world had just collapsed into stillness. 22 years. 22 years of recitals, parent-teacher nights, scraped knees, sleepovers, late-night talks, graduation parties. 22 years of birthdays I planned, doctor appointments I paid for, fears I calmed. All now retroactively. What? A performance? Was I just the fill-in? The accidental father? The oblivious chump standing in for some ghost named Marcus who apparently had her eyes? I didn't go home that night. I drove. Nowhere in particular. Ended up parked in the back lot of a supermarket I hadn't shopped at in over a decade. I sat there for hours, staring at the lives happening behind glowing windows. Watching strangers walk in and out with bags full of groceries, conversations, distractions. All of them blissfully unaware of the kind of quiet that sits inside your chest when you find out your child isn't yours. When you realize you were never even in the photograph. I didn't cry. That was the strangest part. No tears. Not one. Just that sick laugh I kept replaying in my head. And I didn't tell my wife. Not that night. Not the next. Because how do you confront someone who built your whole life out of a lie? How do you walk into your own home, look the woman you thought you knew in the eyes, and say, "Hey, remember that little girl you swore was mine?" Yeah, turns out she's not. So I said nothing. I played my part. We had dinner. We watched our stupid shows. She talked about the neighbors like everything was normal. I nodded. I smiled. I asked questions. I even did the dishes. Because when you find out your whole reality is a forgery, you don't flip the table. You start preparing the fire. The thing about liars is, they get lazy. Especially the ones who think they're smarter than you. They start believing in their own illusion, their own charm, their ability to gaslight you into oblivion with a smile and a hand on your arm. So when I started digging, it wasn't because I hoped to find some explanation. I wasn't praying for a loophole. I was hunting. And I knew the scent would lead me somewhere ugly. It was in the attic, of all places. She'd asked me 100 times to clean it out. I always told her I'd get to it. And of course I never did. Too busy, too tired, too not giving a shit about seasonal decorations and dusty luggage. But after the DNA results, I made time. The first hour was boxes, Christmas lights, fake wreaths, a baby monitor we hadn't used since Haley was 5. Then an old Rubbermaid bin, the kind you slap a donate sticker on and forget about for 20 years. Inside, her college notebooks, a sorority sweatshirt, a mixed CD labeled Spring Break 2001 red heart and loopy pink marker, and wedged between the sleeves of an old cardigan, something heavy, something leather-bound, a journal. Not the kind with a lock or some teenage doodles. This one was adult, practical, covered in little sticky tabs, pages folded at the corners. I sat down on the attic floor. The insulation itched through my jeans. The light bulb above me flickered like it knew what was coming. I opened to a random page. July 2002. We were 2 years into our marriage. Haley was a baby. I was flying out twice a month for client meetings in Detroit and Denver. She was, supposedly, overwhelmed and staying with her sister when I was gone. The entry read, 5. That's the number. I keep trying to feel guilty, but I don't. I needed it. Marcus was the best. God, the things he whispered to me. I miss that. I keep thinking about him. The others were just chaos. Alex will never know. He was in Denver that week. He trusts me too much. It's almost funny. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. I flipped forward. September 2003. Alex bought me a necklace today. I wanted to scream. He's so good to me, and I feel nothing. Just this low boil of resentment. I keep picturing Marcus's hands on me. How alive I felt. Is it bad that I wish Haley had his nose? God, that sounds awful. But sometimes I want there to be a piece of him left. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking. Not from pain. Not even from betrayal. It was that kind of controlled rage. Deep, coiled, volcanic. So dense it feels cold. Like ice inside your ribs. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a drunken regret before we were married. This was a pattern. A structure. A double life built alongside mine like a second house with better wallpaper. 5 men. 5. And she'd written about it like it was therapy. Like it was art. Like every entry was some twisted confessional in which I was the audience and the punchline. The worst part? Her tone. So casual. So smug. Like she knew she'd get away with it forever. And maybe she would have, if Marcus had kept his drunk mouth shut. If I had kept ignoring the eye color. If I had kept telling myself that my gut was just tired, not screaming. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I took the journal, made copies of the pages I needed, resealed the bin exactly how I'd found it, and put everything back in the attic. She'd never notice. Because she never imagined I'd look. She never imagined I'd doubt. And now? Now I knew she'd been lying every damn day of our marriage, with a straight face, with the same lips that kissed our daughter goodnight, with the same hands that wrapped Christmas gifts with my name on the tag. I wasn't just betrayed. I was insulted. And that's the kind of fire no apology puts out. That morning, I made breakfast like it was any other Saturday. Eggs over medium. Bacon, just how she likes it. Crispy on the edge, chewy in the middle. Fresh sourdough toast. French press coffee. Strawberries sliced into little hearts, like I used to do when Haley was 5 and thought I was a magician. The only new addition to the table was a neat stack of paper, placed dead center like a sacred offering. DNA test. Photocopies of the journal entries. Marcus's photo. And on top of it all, a yellow post-it with a single word, scrawled in Sharpie. Proof. She walked into the kitchen with that breezy, photomestic energy I'd grown to loathe. Silk robe, mascara already on, the smell of her citrus shampoo arriving 5 seconds before she did, like an ambassador announcing royalty. She glanced at the table, smiled like I'd just painted her a watercolor sunset. Look at you, Mr. Gourmet. What's the occasion? She sat down, unfolded a napkin like it was brunch in Napa, and reached for the toast. Didn't even glance at the papers. Not really. She saw them, sure. But in that first second, she assumed it was nothing. She thought I was still the same docile Alex she married. Predictable, passive, dull. I poured coffee into her mug. Breakfast, I said. She cocked her head. And the documents. I stared at her. And a funeral. The air shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to make her pause mid-bite. She picked up the DNA report first, read the header, then looked up at me. I watched the gears turn behind her eyes. Denial was her first instinct. Not confusion. Not guilt. Just strategy. She thumbed through the journal copies next. Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. When she hit the Marcus pages, he has her eyes, he'll never know. 5 men. That's when I saw the corner of her lip twitch. But still no panic. She leaned back in the chair, crossed her arms, and exhaled. You really went digging, huh? I tilted my head. You left the shovel in the attic. Silence. And then she smiled. Like the goddamn Cheshire cat. I swear to God. It was the same look she gave the neighbor that one time she backed into his car, and talked her way out of it. Okay, she said. Calm. Controlled. So you snooped. You found things from decades ago. I mean, Jesus, Alex. I thought you were above this. But if you want to rehash ancient history, fine. Let's do it. Ancient? I asked. Which part? Haley not being mine. Or Marcus still calling you on Christmas Eve? Her face twitched. Slightly. Still, she played her part. I never said I was perfect. But we've built a life. A family. And you're throwing it away over some journal entries I wrote when I was confused. I cut in. Was it the fourth guy or the fifth that really tripped you up? That wiped the smug off her face. Just in time for Haley to walk in. She was still in pajamas, hair a mess, rubbing her eyes. What's going on? My wife, ex-wife in waiting, perked right up. Oh, just your father playing detective. I said nothing. I just slid the papers toward the center of the table. Haley glanced down. She read the word paternity and blinked. She looked at me, then her mother, then back at the paper. It didn't take her long. Her voice came out soft, uncertain. What is this? I'm not your biological father, I said. Your mother has known. For a long time. My wife scoffed. That's not proven. It's, Alex, this is insane. We're going to destroy everything over this. No, I said, standing. You already did. But then Haley did something I didn't expect. She looked at me, jaw tight, eyes sharp, and said, So what? You're seriously going to blow up our family because of something Mom did before you were even married? Before I could respond, she added, You're pathetic. It landed harder than anything I'd ever heard in my life. Not because it was cruel, but because it was hers, Haley, my daughter, the one I taught to ride a bike, who I held when she had night terrors, the one I called Pumpkin until she made me stop in middle school. And in that moment, she chose her mother, the woman who lied, who wrote about Marcus like a fantasy, who betrayed me over and laughed about it in ink. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. I just smiled again, same as I did on Thanksgiving. Then I pulled the address out of my pocket, the one Marcus gave me when he texted. She might want to meet me someday. I placed it in front of Haley and whispered, 30 minutes. Pack. Wow, Haley said, holding the DNA report like it was a parking ticket she refused to acknowledge. You actually went through with this? You seriously tested me behind my back. She wasn't yelling. That would have made this easier. No, her tone was the quiet, surgical one, cold steel pretending to be silk. Her hand trembled just a little, but her face didn't crack. Not even close. She had her mother's composure. And apparently her loyalty too. You know what? She added, eyes locking onto mine. You're pathetic. The word hit like a slap across the face, but I didn't blink. I just sat there, arms folded, coffee going cold next to me. She threw the folder back onto the table and the papers fanned out. One sheet slid across the surface and stopped near my elbow, Marcus's photo grinning like an idiot under the fluorescent light of some budget print center. Even now, even here, the bastard looked smug. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a small white envelope, and slid it toward her. The flap was already unsealed. She didn't touch it right away, just stared at it like it might explode. What's this? She asked. A key, I said, and an address. She opened it slowly, like she was performing surgery. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly typed. Marcus J. Holloway, Phoenix, Arizona. A condo number. A phone. Underneath that, call first. He doesn't know what kind of person you've become. Haley looked up, lips parting slightly. That bravado? Gone. Just for a second. There was something beneath it, confusion, maybe. Or guilt. Or the slow realization that her moral compass had been duct taped to her mother's chest for years. I don't want this, she muttered. That makes two of us. She stood, gripped the chair. Let go. Took a step toward the sink like she might actually throw it all away, literally. But she didn't. She just hovered. I don't understand why you're doing this. She made mistakes. A long time ago. You're acting like I'm a crime scene, like everything was a lie. I finally looked her in the eye. It was, I said. And the worst part? You knew something didn't add up. All those years. You knew. You just didn't want to know. She turned her back to me. I let the silence drag. Because she needed to sit in it. All of it. 22 years I gave her. Every school project, every stomach flu, every broken heart. I played the fool in her fairy tale. And the moment the curtain fell and I said the word truth, she labeled me pathetic. No tears, no curiosity, just blind, seething defense of the woman who lied to us both. I stood, slow and deliberate, walked over to the door and opened it. 30 minutes, I said. Pack. She turned around, blinking, confused. What? You wanted honesty? That's it. I can't be your dad if the price is swallowing poison for another 20 years. You're kicking me out, she said, stunned. I'm handing you freedom. You want her version of reality? Go live in it. But not under my roof. Not after this. For a moment, I thought she'd scream. That she'd crumble. That something in her would snap, and the daughter I raised would crawl back through the cracks. But no. She nodded. Cold. Detached. Almost robotic. Fine, she said. Fine. She grabbed the envelope and walked upstairs without another word. And me? I stood there by the door, hearing every creak of the floorboards above me, every drawer opening, every zipper pulled. The hardest part wasn't letting her go. It was realizing she never really belonged to me in the first place. She came to the house 2 days later, like nothing had happened. I was outside, pruning the dead hydrangeas along the fence line, half because they needed it, half because I needed something I could tear apart without going to prison. She parked on the street, not in the driveway. That told me everything. Not ashamed, just strategic. When I saw her stilettos click their way up the path, sunglasses still on despite the overcast sky, I knew exactly which version of her I'd get today. The performer. Alex, she said sweetly, like she hadn't detonated a landmine under 22 years of my life. Can we talk? I didn't answer right away. I pulled another wilted stem, tossed it in the bucket, then finally stood and dusted off my gloves. You're on the clock, I said flatly. She gave a small laugh, fake and sharp. Look, I think we've both overreacted. Things got emotional. Understandably. But I think you're letting yourself spiral here. This isn't you. I raised an eyebrow. You think I'm spiraling? She took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were stone cold, but her lips curled like she'd already won. I mean, come on, Alex. A paternity test? Digging through old journals like you're Sherlock Holmes? You really think that's going to hold up in any kind of legal scenario? That's not evidence. It's a technicality. There it was. The word. Technicality. She honestly thought she could frame 2 decades of betrayal, lies, and manipulation like it was a misplaced decimal point on a tax form. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. You're upset. I get that. I understand. But this doesn't have to be a war. I mean, Haley's siding with me. You really want to isolate yourself completely just to prove some angry point. I stared at her, letting that smug, seasoned manipulation hang in the air like a bad perfume. Then I slowly pulled my phone out of my back pocket, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward her. A photo of a leather briefcase. Open. Inside. Journal pages. Printouts. Financial transfers. Phone records. A notarized copy of Haley's birth certificate with the original paternity form. And a typed letterhead. Rosen, Beckman, and Claymore. Family Law Division. Her smile twitched. This, I said, isn't about Haley. It's about you. And the paper trail you left for 20 goddamn years because you thought I'd never look. She tried to mask the flinch. She failed. You went to a lawyer? She asked, her voice cracking just slightly. I nodded. 2, actually. The second one was a recommendation from a guy I golf with. He specializes in asset tracing and reputation fallout. He's very good. I let that land. She blinked. Once. Twice. Alex, she said, adjusting her tone, softening. Come on. Don't do this. Don't turn this into something it doesn't have to be. Oh, I'm not turning it into anything, I said. You did. Every hotel room. Every lie. Every little moment you looked me in the eyes and told me we were solid. Her jaw clenched. And now, I added, now, I'm just filing the paperwork. She took a breath. I could see her panic trying to bury itself under her teeth. Her fingers twitched at her side like they were grasping for something that wasn't there anymore. Alex, she said, her voice low. Let's not blow up both of our lives over this. You want to be angry? Fine. Be angry. But think. Just think. You really think people are going to take your side when they find out what you're doing to your own daughter? I gave a slow smile. Funny thing about people, I said. They love a good redemption story, especially when the villain never saw it coming. She stood there, quiet now. Her silence wasn't smug anymore. It was nervous, uncertain. The cracks were forming. She'd come here thinking she had leverage. What she didn't realize was this wasn't a conversation. This was a notification. 3 days later, I pressed send on an email that had been sitting in my drafts folder for almost a week. To Executive Director, Bridges for Families Foundation. Subject, regarding volunteer conduct, urgent. Attached were 6 PDF files. Annotated copies of her journal pages. Screenshots of financial inconsistencies involving donations. A timeline of hotel visits that coincided miraculously with volunteer retreats. And one neat little recording of her bragging, after 2 glasses of Merlot, that nonprofits are basically tax-free spas if you know how to smile at the board. It wasn't vengeance. It was arithmetic. Just math. Just cause and effect. She had built her image like a carefully curated Instagram feed. Philanthropic wife, devoted mother, radiant mentor to young women at risk. She made speeches about female empowerment and heels worth more than most people's rent. She chaired committees. She schmoozed with donors. She wrote blogs, for God's sake, about ethical leadership in uncertain times. And now? Now I had stacked enough receipts to bankrupt the televangelist. I didn't even have to do anything theatrical. No press leaks. No anonymous tips to reporters. Just CC the right people. With the right files. 48 hours later, her world began to burn. She was removed from the foundation website with surgical speed. No statement. No thank you for your service. Just a quiet disappearance, like she'd never existed. The staff removed her name from event banners. Her corporate bio vanished. Her email stopped working. Then came the real fun. Her joint credit card got declined at a salon, an expensive one. She tried again. Declined. Again. Declined. Why? Because, thanks to my very capable lawyer, I froze the accounts pending an emergency financial audit. And as it turns out, when you've moved personal funds into nonprofit accounts and back again under creative labels like event recovery and operational morale, banks get very interested. I didn't hear from her until 9:17 that night. My phone rang, and I let it vibrate twice before answering. Her voice was a cocktail of rage and panic. What the hell did you do? I held the phone away from my ear for a second, like I was examining a bug on my windshield. Oh hey, I said. How's that ethical leadership thing working out for you? You're sick, she spat. You just ruined my life, for what? For some paternity test? You think this makes you a hero? You're destroying me. I waited a beat, then said quietly, no, this isn't destruction. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing, erratic, uneven, cornered. This, I continued, isn't revenge. It's restoration. You arrogant son of a... I'm not yelling, I said. Why are you yelling? She tried to pivot. Haley knows. She knows what you're doing. She told me about the envelope. You're turning her against me. No, I said. You did that when you made her the centerpiece of your lie. There was a long silence. I imagined her pacing in some high-end kitchen, barefoot, phone clutched in one hand, glass of Pinot she hadn't touched in the other, watching everything unravel while still trying to pretend it was just a glitch. I'll sue, she whispered finally. You'd have to prove I lied, I said. Spoiler alert, I didn't. Click. I didn't hang up. She did. I sat there in my chair for a moment, staring out the window. Outside, the wind was picking up. The streetlights flickered. Somewhere, a dog barked at nothing. And me? I finally exhaled. No rage. No regret. Just the soft hum of justice in motion. It started with a message from someone I barely remembered. Julie K., Maureen's old friend, used to come around during the early years of our marriage before drifting off like so many seasonal friends do. Subject line, hey, I think you should know this. Inside, a 2-paragraph email, oddly formal, apologetic in tone, but with a sentence that stopped me cold. I should have said something years ago, but I was afraid of what she'd do to me. Maureen didn't just cheat with Marcus. There were others. Miami, Palm Springs, Seattle. If you need proof. I have it. I didn't respond right away. I stared at the screen like it had grown fangs. Then, calmly, I closed my office door and wrote back one sentence. I need everything. She replied within 10 minutes. What followed was an avalanche. Photos from a 2010 charity conference in Miami, Maureen in a halter dress, wrapped around a man named Kyle. Different from Marcus. Definitely not a board member. A forwarded chain of texts from 2015, Maureen bragging about a retreat in Seattle where the keynote wasn't the only thing that blew me away, smirking face. Screenshots. Emails. Even receipts. Hotel bookings charged to an account under her maiden name. Dates that lined up perfectly with weekends she claimed were mother-daughter spa trips. And Julie wasn't the only one. Within days, two more women, Linda and Angela, came forward. Both had known her during different phases of her philanthropy. Both had stories that mirrored each other like broken glass patterns. Maureen would always say she needed to recharge, go find clarity, and off she'd go. Always with some cover story that sounded noble. Mentorship retreats, women's workshops, leadership panels. But she was never alone. She was always with someone. Each time, a different name. Each time, the same strategy. Erase the trail, discredit suspicion, gaslight the man who waited at home with dinner warming in the oven. And I collected it all. I didn't gloat. I didn't rush. I created folders, organized by year, by city, by name. I tagged dates, cross-referenced timestamps. I built a timeline so tight even a prosecutor would blush. By week's end, I had a dossier. 54 pages. I printed it on heavy paper. Bound it. Black cover. No title. Just clean, cold truth. I gave a copy to my lawyer. I made another for safekeeping. And one more for her. No threats. No drama. Just placed it in a nondescript envelope with a sticky note. You lied better than most. But not well enough. I mailed it to her office. And while she continued sipping wine and drafting apologies for her break from the foundation, I was already preparing the next phase. A video compilation. Set to go live. A silent montage of stills and screenshots, names redacted, identities protected, except hers. Dates. Cities. Hotel logos. Timestamp text from 3 different lovers. A map at the end showing the full pattern, the strategy, the long con. I wasn't aiming to destroy her. I was going to reveal her. Peel back the layers, let the world see the woman behind the mask. Not the one who cried at fundraisers, or held Haley's hand at graduations, or offered wisdom to younger couples like she was a walking Lifetime movie. No, the real Maureen. The one who thought no one was watching. And she still had no idea what was coming. The video dropped on a Thursday at 6 p.m. sharp. Right when everyone was home. Right when the suburban gods of timing blessed Facebook feeds, wine glasses, and local charity groups settling in for their end-of-week dopamine hits. No teasers. No warning. Just a quiet post from a burner account. Who is Maureen D? The other side of a nonprofit queen. No commentary. No hashtags. No outrage bait. Just a single link. Within 30 minutes, it had over 3,000 views. By midnight, 28,000. It opened with a soft piano track, something tasteful, almost too tasteful for what followed. The first image, Maureen, smiling at a podium during a Women in Leadership luncheon, one hand over her heart. Then the crossfade to a hotel invoice in Palm Springs, dated 3 days earlier. Then text messages. Can't wait to sneak away again, kiss mark. He's in Denver this week, we're good, winking face. Then a brief clip of her diary entry, zoomed in on the line. Alex is too busy, too dull. Marcus made me feel again. Then financial records. Split screen with donation logs. Her signature, next to a withdrawal marked emergency vendor cost. The same weekend she'd flown to Miami with someone named Jared. Each slide calmly narrated by a woman's voice. AI generated, professional, eerily neutral. Like a documentary about fraud you stumble onto at 2 a.m. No commentary. No insults. Just documentation. By the 8-minute mark, her face was unrecognizable from the persona she'd curated over decades. By the 10-minute mark, the comments exploded. Some outraged. Some gleeful. Some in denial. And by the 12-minute mark, the final image, a quote from Maureen's own speech 3 years earlier. The truth always comes out. even when it whispers. Then it cut to black. I didn't smile. Not right away. I just stared at the screen in my study, lights off, fingers steepled under my chin, watching it go viral in real time. One foundation board member unfollowed her. Another publicly reconsidered their association. By morning, 2 major donors issued statements reviewing the disturbing allegations. And by noon the next day, Good Day Metro ran a segment. Local philanthropist faces ethical scrutiny after anonymous video surfaces. Her name was Fire. Her brand? Ash. And me? I poured a whiskey. Just one. Neat. Around 3:24 p.m., my phone buzzed. Text from Haley. We need to talk. No emojis. No punctuation fluff. Just those 4 words. For a moment, I didn't move. Let the phone sit face up on the table while I watched the ice in my glass melt just a little. When the knock came, it was soft. Hesitant. I opened the door to see her standing there, hoodie, tired eyes, phone clutched in one hand like a lifeline. She looked older than she had a week ago. Not in age. In gravity. I saw the video, she said quietly. I nodded. Stepped aside. She walked into the kitchen. Same place where she called me pathetic days ago. Same counter where she sided with a lie she never built, but eagerly protected. She didn't sit. Neither did I. She started, then stopped. Why did you? I mean this? The public part? Why go that far? I didn't answer right away. Just stared at her until she lowered her gaze. I warned her, I said. She smiled. She said it was a technicality, that I wouldn't do anything. But the video is truth, I said. I didn't spin it. I didn't edit her words. That was her doing. She swallowed. Hard. I didn't know it was this bad. Didn't want to know, I corrected. There's a difference. She looked like she wanted to cry. Or punch something. Maybe both. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Then don't, I said. And I turned my back. Because what do you say to someone who watched you drown and only screamed after you washed up on shore? She came back the next evening. No warning. No text this time. Just the lone knock. 3 slow taps. Like she was asking permission from a ghost. When I opened the door, Haley stood there with red eyes and a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. The DNA results. The same one she'd thrown across the table during that breakfast from hell. Now it looked like she'd been carrying it around like a confession she couldn't burn. I didn't say a word. She walked in, sat at the kitchen island. Same stool, same spot, same chipped corner she used to trace with her fingers when she was 12 and waiting for pancakes. She unfolded the page, smoothed it out like it was sacred. I looked it up, she said. Read everything. About paternity probabilities. Legal fathers. Biological fathers. All of it. I nodded. She didn't look at me. Just stared at the paper. And yeah, she whispered. You were right. The sentence should have felt like vindication. A full circle moment. Some movie ending resolution. It didn't. It felt like ashes in my mouth. She lied. Haley continued. To you. To me. For years. I kept trying to find a version of the truth where she wasn't the villain. Where maybe you were overreacting. Where maybe I didn't have to choose. Her voice cracked on that last word. I wanted to believe she was just flawed. Just scared. But she wasn't. She was deliberate. I nodded again. Still didn't speak. Haley finally looked up, eyes wet but defiant. You were always there, she said. For everything. My first dance. College move-in day. That time I totaled the Camry. You didn't even yell, just handed me the insurance card and said, we all screw up once. A faint smile tried to crawl across her lips. It died quickly. But now, she swallowed. Now I don't know who you are. That landed harder than any insult. Because it was true. I wasn't the same man. Not the same dad. Not the same anything. The DNA didn't just erase biology. It rewired every memory between us. She was still Haley. But I wasn't her anymore. And she knew it. I want to fix it, she said. But I don't know how. And I don't know if it even matters to you now. I leaned forward, elbows on the counter, and finally spoke. You're not the reason I burned it down, I said. But you stood close enough to watch it happen. And you didn't move. She flinched. Tears slid down, silent and clean. I'm not angry, I added. Not anymore. But you don't love me, she whispered. No, I said. I do. But it's not the same love. It's quieter now. Cautious. We sat there like that, two people trying to figure out if blood was ever the thing that held us together in the first place. And when I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd find some fragile path back, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single text. I warned you not to go public. You're going to regret this. M. I turned the screen toward Haley. She read it. Her face shifted. She knew the tone. She'd heard it her entire life. She's not done, she said. No, I replied. But neither am I. Because if she thought what I'd done so far was revenge, she hadn't even seen the final move. It happened on a Tuesday. I was walking out of my lawyer's office with a fresh set of financial documents under my arm, clear, crisp proof of every shell game Maureen had ever played. The sunlight was sharp, the air too clean for what was about to follow. Two plainclothes officers approached as I unlocked my car. Mr. Dalton? One asked, already pulling out a badge. I nodded. You're under investigation for domestic assault. We'd like you to come with us. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask, what is this about? Because I already knew. They cuffed me, gently, apologetically, almost like they'd been briefed to expect someone calm. Someone prepared. I was. At the station, they walked me into a cold interview room with a flickering ceiling light and a one-way mirror like something out of a bargain crime drama. Then came the accusation. She claims, the detective said, you showed up to her apartment 3 nights ago. That you forced your way in. That you grabbed her, screamed at her, left bruises. I looked him in the eye and said, check the timestamp. He blinked. Excuse me. My phone location data. Uber receipt. Restaurant security footage. I was at Walter's Steakhouse from 7:12 p.m. to 10:03 p.m. with my attorney. We split a bottle of cab. His tab's in the system. He's also willing to testify. Want the receipt? He stared at me for a long beat. No bruises in the medical report either, right? Just verbal aggression and emotional distress. Which is interesting, considering she initiated contact by text the night before. I slid my phone across the table. Opened to a message Maureen had sent, timestamped, cheerful tone. I'm willing to talk. Just us. No lawyers. Come by Friday night? I'll leave the door unlocked. I waited as he read it. Twice. Then slowly turned the screen off. I'll need to verify this. Of course, I said, folding my hands. Please do. 2 hours later, I was walking free. No charges filed. No mugshot. Just a brief signature and a faintly embarrassed nod from the detective who mumbled, "We'll be in touch." I didn't smile until I was in the car. Because I knew exactly what this was. Maureen had made her final move. A desperate Hail Mary pass in a game she was already losing. She didn't want justice. She wanted the optics. The chaos. She wanted to drag me into the mud and scream, look, he's just as dirty. But I came armored. Every conversation logged. Every interaction recorded. I had prepared for war, and she had brought an empty pistol. 2 weeks later, in court, she stood there in a beige suit 2 sizes too big and tears painted on her cheeks, telling the judge I was aggressive, vindictive, dangerous. My lawyer let her hang herself. Then we brought the timeline. The receipts. The texts. The video. The judge didn't even ask for a recess. Motion to dismiss, granted. Her countersuit for emotional damages, denied. Her plea to retain shared assets, denied. And her final insult, that I was a threat to my daughter? It was shredded when Haley herself submitted a written statement admitting the accusation made no sense. Still, she didn't sit with me in court. I walked out alone. Not handcuffed. Not smeared. Just clean. As I stepped into the parking lot, Maureen was already outside. She stood by her lawyer's sedan, arms folded, waiting for something. An apology, maybe. A last-minute truce. Or just the satisfaction of knowing I'd see her face one more time. I didn't stop. I walked past her. Didn't flinch. Didn't gloat. But as I opened my car door, I said just loud enough for her to hear. This isn't vengeance. This was extraction. She didn't respond. Just stood there, hollowed out and shrinking by the second. That night, I got home and poured the last of the bourbon. No ice. My house was quiet. A different kind of quiet than before. Not grief. Not confusion. Just silence. Free of her. Free of them. The war was over. And like all wars, it didn't leave me whole. But it left me standing. And sometimes that's enough.